Hi Yuki, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing, Johnson?
I'm well. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Truth, Wisdom, and Freedom Conversations for
I love the
Conscious
title.
Living. Yeah, it's a very broad theme, things I'm very passionate about. Who doesn't want more truth and freedom and wisdom in their lives, right?
Yeah, that's perfect, actually.
So I am really excited to have here Yuki Yoshii, who is based in California, and he is a mindset coach, and he's also the creator of the Satori method, the mindset, Satori mindset, and so and we're here to have a conversation about money. Which if you are a spiritual person or you are a person who works a lot with consciousness, I know I've been through this personally. We might demonize money because of certain belief systems that we have had from our parents or in the past or wherever it's come from. So it's a really important topic to talk about, especially now, because collectively I feel that there is definitely this undercurrent of fearing abundance, um, hoarding, saving. These are the things that are being highlighted from COVID-19, right? And so there's so much that we can talk about here with how money, which is really a first chakra issue, and how we can talk about that. And I also love that Yuki comes from an embodied movement perspective, because he himself was a dancer, and he also works with somatic movement. Through many different modalities, he's trained that way. I'm trained that way, and so we share a lot of these common threads. And what's really interesting is that we connected because of the global situation, and now we're making connections all over the world. And in our conversations, as I've been learning about Yuki, we share a lot of similar things, so we can touch on that. But I'd love for you to maybe talk a little bit about your background and talk about Satori and how you came to what it is that you do with mindset coaching.
Yeah, so I'll do my best to keep it short because I can talk about that forever. So I'm originally from Tokyo, right? As you can hear in my accent, but I don't know if you can hear a Spanish in my accent because I grew up in South America. So I do have a Spanish background, and I hop on and hop off two different cultures, right? When I was little. Um, and it's interesting that I feel something strong here, Johnson, because you're on the other side of the planet right now, the other opposite hemisphere. And I don't know if you remember that I reached out to you, that I saw you doing a live, and then you were doing specifically the topic that I was doing workshop in here. Something like why law of attraction does not work,
That's
right?
right. Yes, yes, that's how we
And
connected.
yeah, and then I'm so passionate about talking about why law of attraction does not work because people are talking about it, yet everyone is just talking about it, right? So let's go back a little bit though. So I did start with being a dancer, and that's my history. Although the blood is there always, right? And I think it's interesting. One of the things that I share with people often is that because I had this cultural shift when I was like age 11 from Peru, which is a developing country, to moving to one of the most technologically advanced, wealthy country, Tokyo. And what I saw was a culture shock, right? And, you know, because of that, I feel like I didn't develop any solid identity from
Mm.
either of the country, which allowed me to be outside of the box. And I think I started my spiritual journey when I was a teenager, about the same time as I started to dance professionally. And movement and exploring consciousness became my thing to explore inside. I went to like an undergrad school in Tokyo, which I didn't study at all because the academic study didn't resonate with me. So fast forward, I moved to Los Angeles for dance, and then I injured my back like a lot of dancers do, and I shifted to things like yoga, Pilates, which I'm surprised, to hear that a moment ago you said that you used to own a studio. And I moved to this country, Los Angeles, and I right now reside in San Francisco. But I knew that dance wasn't where I'm gonna be landing. Intuitively, I knew that exploring consciousness and the self-development aspect of it to help people really find out their truth and the wisdom to be able to live free, which is the topic of this conversation, is something that I deeply am called to do. I was feeling that naturally.
Sure.
So yeah, so
I can definitely resonate with that on so many levels because, though you grew up in Peru and then went to Tokyo, I being, a Chinese American born and raised in New York City, I definitely can resonate on the identity piece because there was definitely this sense of being torn between two cultures, the East and the West, right? My parents were very conservative because of all of the issues that they had to deal with communism and fleeing from communism as refugees. They sought asylum because their families were being killed in China. And so they were buying into the whole notion of the American dream and about reclaiming what it is that they lost. And so there was this huge pressure culturally to succeed and to thrive and to save and to be something. And so there was so much push on identity and on being. I rebelled completely against that, and I ended up going to theater school where I also performed and danced and did all of that. And so I had a similar trajectory to you, and it all came back down to the identity piece. Who am I? What do I want to be? Who do I want to become? And is there anything more than, these traumas and dramas that I've inherited from just, coming from my background? And how do we move on from there? And that's something that's always driven me, that question of why. And so I would love to, ask you about, how you came to Satori from movement to, dance to then, somatics, and then to mindset, and then now to working with consciousness.
So that's so I moved to the Bay Area from Los Angeles in 2010 to pursue graduate school, and it was all about consciousness and somatic studies. And the major technically was a holistic health education, but I was so into the mind and the consciousness and the embodiment of it, which is the somatic piece of it, right? So I was always into movement and body, but then at the same time I really wanted to help people get out of their their story and the trap, the self-imposed trap, right? And just like you said, identity is huge, right? I often tell people to the group that I run is that there's all kinds of information out there, and people assume that information is what they need to be able to help them change the result. But then all the information is one Google away, one YouTube away, one book away today, right? So what I think that people need to realize is that, what we need is transformation. And transformation, definition of transformation to me is changing, altering the formation of the identity. So, studying movement and exploring my own version of, the story, and then observing a lot of people, I think Satori mindset, Satori is a Japanese word and it comes from Chinese language, but it means to awaken and to realize. And one of the things, or actually two fundamental problems that people face today that is a fundamental aspect of this Satori mindset is fear and habits. And when we dive into overcoming and shifting around that, it's so effective and efficient in changing people's identity. And you mentioned about who you are and who you want to become. I think I see a lot of people lost, who they are, and then even having an option of thinking about who they can become. Like people are today in a default state, in a receiving mode where, for instance, right now people are waiting for the pandemic to settle, right? So I think the conformity that the world has, that people wants to fit into the mass, created a certain default state. And I think the evolution from dancing movement into consciousness, into Satori, is just my curiosity, curiosity to be able to impact people, to really change. I'm interested in helping people change.
Sure. Yeah. Let's talk a little about that change, and then we can relate it into the money mindset aspect. And I think it's important to touch on what you were already starting to speak on about transformation. And I love what you said about transformation being the relationship of what it is that you're shifting between you and your perceived identity, right?
Yeah.
And I love the Zen Buddhist angle of Satori moving into an awakened, realized state, right? Because that Satori really comes from a Zen Buddhist lens, and it's and about acquiring a new vantage point, a new way of looking at how things are, the relationship between the subject and the object, and also marrying the two so that the inner and the outer are actually, there's no difference. And I think as we touch into the identity piece in relationship to transformation, we also need to really look at, the stripping away of the different roles and archetypes that we have accumulated as people, right? This is an exercise that I tend to give people. I have them list down, all the different roles and hats that they wear during their life, a son, a brother, a lover, a teacher, a guide, a student, whatever it is, it can even, the one who cares, the caretaker, the one who is jealous, the jealous one, all these different parts of ourselves that we either forget about or we hide, but we have so many hats that we wear. And to really transform our relationship to our identity, we have to understand it first, all these different parts of ourselves, so that we can eventually let go of the ones that make no sense, rewrite those programs, those scripts, and then come into a place where we are in full alignment. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about today is around the theme of money, because money brings about issues of security and foundation, right? And so when we are in a place of crisis where we're worrying about where food's going to come from, how we're going to pay for rent, all of these things, it brings up, in the physical body, pelvic floor, first chakra, legs, hips, that kind of issue. And you can see people locking down on a postural level in this area. Energetically, it's happening in this area because this is our connection energetically to our root, our foundation. So I would love to hear from you about how you look at the relationship to money and how you see it in a movement pattern, right? How it's been stuck in certain people. What are the belief systems that keep people stuck in worrying about money in the ways that you've been working with transformation in your clients?
Yeah. No, it's interesting you mentioned the first chakra and the survival, because that's how exactly I explain. And then at the beginning of this, interview or video, you mentioned about people fear abundance, and people do fear, becoming wealthy, the concept of wealth, the concept of money. People fear around actually even being successful, right? One of the things that I have been talking to people is that people tend to assume that they fear failing, but more than that, most people fear succeeding, because it's above the scope of how they identify themselves. And I think one of the perspective shift that we must have globally is that abundance is everywhere, right? And then when we begin looking at money as a form of, another form of energy, I don't see, here's the truth, Johnson, I don't see health, love, and money as three different things. It's just a manifestation of the energy that comes from our consciousness.
I totally agree.
Yeah. So when we truly understand that the mind-body connection, that consciousness and matter connection, right? It's not about whether how much money you have, but it's more about where are you coming from, and then just, like you said a moment ago, to identify and be clear about who you are, and to understand that there's only abundance, and the lack and limitation is coming from our thoughts based on our belief.
So when did you come to this realization yourself personally? Do you feel that a lot of it is cultural? Do you feel that because you do come, I don't know actually what your spiritual religious, you come from a Zen Buddhist background, I'm assuming?
No? Actually.
Okay.
I don't come from any. I come from observation.
Okay.
Yeah.
But do you feel that they were atheists, you said?
No, artists.
Gotcha.
Artists. Yeah.
Do you feel that there is a cultural influence in how we perceive money? Because I for sure can see that in America, growing up in America, there is an energy over money around, hoarding and saving. I mean, hoarding probably is a strong word, but saving, hoarding is probably an extreme version of saving, but it's from a place of, I will never have enough, so I'm going to keep everything for myself. And it's everyone for themselves. And I'm going to work really hard so I can get X, Y, and Z. So energetically, where if we look and dissect that, it really is about I'm not worthy and I don't deserve it. And so I'm just going to do what I've been told, and these are the patterns I've been taught, and then people repeat this time and time again. And so culturally, I know that from America, and then tied in with my parents, even though my parents are, Buddhist, a lot of it got a bit muddy culturally, cross-culturally, and especially post-communism, or where they were coming from, a lot of the energy around money was centered around fear. We don't have enough of it. And so how do you feel, or what do you feel is most important for people to shift and to break through so that they no longer have that relationship of the fear of abundance? Because we can talk about why, and the observations, but what do people need to break through so that they no longer have this fear of abundance, this fear of becoming fully who they are?
Right. So this is actually a perfect time to share this because of the, pandemic. And there are two types of people right now, right? People who are feeling a fear based on the outside threat, and people who are contracted, and people who are focusing on the fear-based information and the actual, reality that they're perceiving in. There's also a group of people who sees this as a signal from the infinite intelligence telling us that we need to pay attention to something deeper that we have been dismissing. And then that two group of people is going to be distinguished based on how you're living from your animal nature, because your animal nature is based on your instinct that produces fear. So, fear is a gift, right? It's not an enemy. We're designed biologically to feel fear so we can protect ourselves from the outside threat. But the problem of that is that people start letting that to drive them. And when you start getting caught up with the outside world, that is what's going to activate immediately and then persist that. Now, when we really understand who we are, and then here's the truth though, Johnson. I think every single one of us deeply inside know that there's more than this material physical world. I truly believe that every single one of us knows deeply inside. And it's just a matter of how much we're conditioned and uncovering with layers, right?
Sure.
But deeply inside, each one of us knows. And to really understand who we are, and we're spiritual being having a physical experience, not the other way around. People tend to assume that we're a physical being, and when we're suffering, we want to have the spiritual experience in the mountain, right? So when
we call that bypassing. People are trying to bypass their issues and use that route as an escape route.
Yeah. So to misunderstand our essential identity of who we are, which is a spiritual being, that small, distinction and identification changes the path completely to the opposite, right? To focus on fear or to focus on the other side, love, divinity. And
so if we were to focus on these more zoomed out purpose-based questions of why am I here on this planet?
Mm-hmm.
What is the point of me doing what I'm doing with my job, with my career? And we reevaluate all of these things at a fundamental level. You're saying that all of these money things will just sort themselves out, our relationships to money, or is it that we then have a different perspective on money? Which is it?
We're going to have a different perspective on money, and we need to, it's not just about letting go and shifting perspective, right? We need to move towards expanding the awareness to attract abundance. And that action needs to happen. So this is exactly, why a lot of people's law of attraction does not work, right? Because people tend to visualize, and then they're hoping that the money is going to be on their backyard tree.
Well, this is part of the whole bypassing thing. People want things, but they're afraid of doing the work. And part of the work is really, like what you were saying, is unlayering these different roles and archetypes and responsibilities and conditioned patterns that we have layered on ourselves, collected consciously or unconsciously. And we cannot move forward into a place of abundance if we're weighted down with all of this crap, right? That's what it is. It's crap.
Yeah.
Right? It's heavy, and it's old programs that no longer serve us. And the law of attraction will work if you're coming from a place of clear centeredness, purity, from a place of understanding and wisdom. But it doesn't work if you're using it as a way to hope, right? For something to come. Right? It doesn't work that way. It's just that if you are energetically in alignment and you're resonant and you're broadcasting that frequency of this is who I am, and you have a relationship with the universe where the universe is benign and it's there to support you and it's not out against you, right? You've cleared out your victim mentality, with relationships, with, parents, all of this stuff, your mommy and daddy issues. If you've cleared out jealousy, betrayal, denial, greed, base fear, all of these things will slowly start to blossom within you, the ability to attract and to receive. And I think that's a big part. It's also the ability to receive. I've definitely experienced in my personal life times where it's very difficult to receive compliments or to receive love, even because of the way that I was raised. Like, I wasn't raised with the happiest of parents. They were very abusive parents. So, my ability to receive has always been very muted and filtered. And until I was able to work through those issues of receiving these things that don't seem to have anything to do with money, but when you're receiving love and compliments and gratitude and all these things, it's energy. Right? And because I was having difficulty receiving these things, money also wasn't coming in. But when I learned how to receive and set that program up inside this body, then money started coming in, right? And I know that I'll always be taken care of because I now have a different relationship to myself and to the universe. And I think that's what we're trying to touch on here, is on the identity piece and why that's really important when it comes to abundance.
And I think what you're essentially saying and what we're talking about is to understand that each one of us has a power to choose instead of being in a victim role. And you mentioned about how I would connect this into movement and somatic stuff, right? Because, and anything and everything that I said is not meant to and come from offending anyone, right? And the way that I suggest to move the body is also, that doesn't come from a biomechanical background. Like, the movement practice needs to be exploration. And essentially, I don't come from this place of telling people what to do and how to move, even the instruction is there. The essential role that I have, which I'm sure you would agree with me, is that my role is to help people become an expert of their own body, right? And then when they realize that they have a choice and they have a capacity and ability to explore their own body that no one else can experience, and to move from that place, your body start connecting as a whole. And then your body's your temple, of who you are, that you can be present, right? So the whole movement practice becomes a part of your identification. That's how I look at it. And we don't do movement, we are movement. So the whole process of exploring or subtle somatic portion of movement is also inquiry to connect with the intelligence. I don't want this conversation to be too philosophical and then too
late. We've already gone there. Too late. But it really is about zooming out to zoom in, right? Mm-hmm. If we don't have the right relationship, you hear this a lot in Buddhist philosophy. We went from money mindset matters to Buddhist philosophy, right? But it's all related, right? If we do not have that relationship, and I'm not talking about right as in right and wrong. I'm talking about a divine, larger than life, bigger perspective, and at that relationship to the universe and to life. If we don't have that, and we see life as fatalistic, and that we're designed for failure, and that everyone's out to get us, and that we're who am I to speak out and to voice what I want and who I am, and we come from that place, then of course all that is going to manifest in our life around money, around relationships, around health is going to reflect that. Everything is centered around consciousness, which is why meditation is blowing up the way that it's blowing up nowadays, which is why quantum science is debunking all the old Newtonian ways of looking at the world, which is very much like we are separate of the world, we are just machines, and we own the world. And it's now about stewardship and about how we can coexist with everything around us, and that includes money. And this is one of the things I see in the spiritual community that is a big issue, that people fear money because they see all the things that money has done. There are money itself is not inherently evil, right? It is just it's a physical exchange of energy, of appreciation, of gratitude for something done, and we can have more of it if we choose to, or we can have very little of it. And it all comes down to a choice of how you are relating to the ability to receive and to give what you have to give of yourself. And energetically, that is it. That's all money is. It's up to us. And I think that we can do beautiful things with money. We can destroy things with money. And if we choose the mindset to create beauty and to create change and to affect massive transformations in whatever way we do in our communities, and we don't think about money as this survival mechanism, right? And we've shifted all of that itself is an identity shift, because any sort of relationship shift is going to be an identity shift, because you yourself have to change. That will start to invite the flow of money, because the money is going to support the purpose and the why. And this is something that all conscious leaders need to recognize, because when I'm making, let's say, like a very earth-based decision about spending money, right? I don't evaluate like the cost so much. Yes, that does come into play. Like, oh, is this expensive or not expensive? I first go into the experience. You know, what kind of experience am I going to embody if I purchase this, you know, item, or
Right.
Or if I purchase this service or program or whatever it is, right? It's like, how am I going to feel when I go through that? And then I go into the costs and the means, and, oh, do I have enough to do that? But if we look at something, you know, from a place of like, oh no, I don't have enough, I'm just going to store everything away here, right? And you're already coming from a place of fear, we'll never get anything done. Like you
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And then one of the things that, you know, in my community that I'm in, we talk about decision. And, you know, one of the things that we're big on is that people, you know, let the outside situation to dictate whether they want to decide or not. But, you know, when we really understand that quantum aspect and the frequency that we are vibrating, the surrounding is not ready because your frequency is in that place, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I suggest and invite people to do often, which is a little scary if you're not used to, right? But you always want to make a decision from the outcome where you want to be instead of where you're currently at.
Yeah.
Which is a huge statement for a lot of people who are not used to that. What are you know, people look at me like, what are you talking about? But when we really understand vibrations and frequency and how we expand our awareness, you know, everything starts there in the spiritual realm, in the thought place.
And this is where business and spirituality blend and bleed into each other. An entrepreneur would say the return on investment. And all entrepreneurs are very spiritual by nature. They just are, because they're so connected to the vision, to what they see ahead versus where they currently are. And in terms of investments and risk taking, like if you look at money and risk taking and investments, that is, you have to be so connected to what inspires you to be able to take that risk. And because 90% of the world is conditioned to think in a certain way and to behave in a certain way of like, oh, I will only do this when I achieve this. Yes. Right? And that's a slow way of moving through life, getting some of the things that you want some of the time and living a mediocre life. And to be truly abundant in spiritual wealth, in material wealth, and Osho was really big on this, which was the blending of the spiritual and the material. And a lot of people may find him super controversial, but I think that's another thing about, you know, man. But I love the essence of what it is that he's teaching, you know, which is the blend of the both. And that, you know, we can look at business, we can look at our professional lives, we can look at our spiritual lives as not something separate, but that they are one and the same. Right. And when we can merge them together, that's when we can start making decisions that will impact our why and move forward towards that versus where we are now. Because, you know, I also go through, you know, certain big emotional shifts. You know, some days I'm sad and some days I'm a little bit like, you know, what's going on, confused. And some days I might be a little bit agitated. But I'm not going to make decisions from those places. Because, you know, the shamans and a lot of the traditional the healing traditions around the world always look at emotion as a dangerous place to be making decisions out of, because those emotions may not be ours in that moment. They may just be sensations passing through the soma, the body, in that moment. And so I'm not making decisions from that place. I have to clear it, right? And then when I've gotten really good at clearing it, then I know that the decisions I make are coming from a centered place, you know. So then I'll wait. If I'm ever in an extreme, overwhelming emotional place, I'll wait, let things pass through, and then I'll go, like what you were saying, look at where it is that I want to be, how it is that I want to embody the future, and work towards, you know, the destiny angle of where my soul wants to take me, and then that's how I make the decision, and then then the money will come.
Yes,
you know?
Absolutely. You know what you just said about, you know, blending that physical, material, and the spiritual. I think I truly feel like that's the next level that the world needs to go. And I truly believe, though, and I sense that this whole thing that's happening is telling us that we need to go there collectively.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Is there anything else that you would love to share about money and abundance and spirituality and consciousness before we end? This has been so much fun talking with you, but we can talk
Yeah.
on and on, I'm sure.
Well, one statement that, my mentor says, and what I often tell people is that money goes to where it's welcome and stay where it's invited. So, and then just like you said a moment ago, the result is based on the blockage that we're holding on to. So any of the result that we're experiencing is 100% based on what's happening inside of us, right? And people tends to wants to do more of, but the truth is that we need to be doing less of the thing that we don't need to be doing, right? It's the other way around. We're so tensed up and wants to do more and more and more to expand, but we can expand graciously if we let go of the things that we don't need to be doing, including our physical tension, emotional tension, and all the blockages that we're creating, almost like a psychological break half on, right? If we release that, it just flows, because that's the nature of that. Abundance is the natural way of us being. So if we let go, that's gonna come, right?
I love that.
Natural version of it.
Letting go, surrendering.
Yeah.
It's all again coming back down to, consciousness and to the soul, right?
Yeah.
Because when we were children, we let go very easily. We didn't worry about, what was coming next. We would risk jumping from the monkey bar over to the swings and flipping around on the trees, and we just threw our bodies around.
Yeah.
There's this sense of letting go, and then slowly we stop letting go because we hurt ourselves or our parents say no. So we already innately have this capacity to let go, to be playful, to explore, to go on an adventure, and it's all there. It's just that these other things that we learned from teenage years to adult years and all of this stuff that keep us from that which we already know and have. And I love what you said about abundance, that it's already there. So it's about taking off the layers and revealing that. And that's beautiful. Yeah. Cool. Amazing. Cool. So much fun talking with you, Yuki. And this has been pretty awesome. And if there's any other questions from anyone viewing or any comments, feel free. Otherwise, we're probably going to end it here, because we'll probably keep talking about consciousness if you leave us on the camera
for a week.
Yeah, for a week. Yeah, sure. Well, thank you so much for your time, and well wishes to you over there in California.
But thank you so much for having me. I'm amazed how the language that you use, and the perception and the perspective that you have about consciousness and in wealth, and also the somatic aspect is there. Not everyone that I meet have all those components. Like I explore a lot of stuff, right, in the past, so I felt like immediately, this guy has been, it almost felt like you have been going through the same, like a track, but we have never met, and then you're in Australia on the other side, and I just found you out of nowhere, and it was amazing to see how much of our background is similar.
Yeah, I love that. We're tapped into the same quantum field.
Yeah, cool.
Beautiful. All right, Yuki, you're very welcome. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks.